You said she died, so how did I see her yesterday? The millionaire laughed, until the boy revealed that she was trapped between two worlds. Sometimes, death isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a truth no one wants to see. What if someone you love died, but appeared to someone else the next day? Most would laugh, call it madness, say it's made up. But when a street kid looked into the eyes of a grieving millionaire and said, "I saw your wife yesterday," something impossible began to happen. Something that defies logic, religion, and even what we call reality. Today's story will turn your head upside down, because it involves life after death, millionaire corruption, spirits who refuse to leave, and a child who sees what adults pretend not to see. And in the end, you'll realize that love transcends much more than graves. It transcends entire worlds. If you believe that everything has an explanation, prepare to doubt everything. If you think you've seen it all, prepare to see what no one else has seen. And if you're new here, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on where you're watching from, because today's story is going to move you. Now take a deep breath, and come with me to where few dare to look, the place between life and death. The boy appeared at the mansion's door like a shadow out of place in the world, thin, dirty, frightened, but with a gaze so firm it seemed to carry a truth greater than himself. The millionaire, still enveloped in recent grief, believed that the boy was just another intruder trying to ask for food or money. But when the child opened his mouth, the air seemed to disappear from the room. "I saw your wife yesterday. She asked to speak with you." The sentence made no sense, and perhaps that's why it hit so hard. After all, it had only been 3 days since he had buried Helena. The man laughed. Not a playful laugh, but that nervous laugh of someone trying to banish terror before it takes shape. He thought the boy was delirious, making up some story to elicit sympathy. But then the boy described, with disturbing detail, the clothes Helena was wearing on the day of the accident. Details that had never been revealed. Details that no one could know. The millionaire felt a shiver run down his spine, as if the whole house were waiting for him to believe or collapse. But the boy didn't stop there. He said that Helena wasn't dead, at least not completely. She was trapped in a place between two worlds, trying to return, but unable to cross over without help. The millionaire felt his heart pound so hard it seemed to echo off the marble floor of the room. The child spoke with a calmness impossible for someone of that age, as if carrying the weight of many past lives. And before he could react, the boy added, "She has little time left, and neither do you." And this is exactly where it all begins, but not in the way you imagine. The news of the accident had been too brutal for any heart to bear, and the millionaire, still shaken by the boy's unexpected revelation, began to mentally revisit every detail of that day. What hurt most was remembering that everything happened too fast. Police, paramedics, medical report, everything seemed to fit together like an automatic, cold, almost mechanical sequence, too much for a real tragedy. And the question that now hammered in his mind was simple and devastating. What if I buried someone who wasn't his real wife? The doubt opened a rift impossible to ignore. One detail never made sense. At the hospital, he couldn't see her face. They said she had been unrecognizable from the impact. He believed them, because he didn't have the strength to question it. But the boy, with his small, unerring voice, planted the seed that the story might have been manipulated. And when a grieving man realizes he may have been deceived, a kind of courage is born that borders on dangerous. A courage that no longer respects limits, protocols, or official versions. The most disturbing memory flashed back. The company security guard who insisted he sign the documents quickly, without looking closely. At the time, it seemed like mere diligence. Now, it seemed like excessive haste. He began to mentally add up everything that had been done in such a rush. The identification, the burial, the release of the body. Nothing had been natural. Nothing had been questioned. And the more he thought about it, the stronger the feeling grew that someone wanted him to accept Helena's death without raising a fuss. A death that was too convenient, but for whom? The first clues emerged silently, almost timidly, as if they had waited 2 months to gather courage. Lost documents. Reports with minor contradictions. Hospital employees who didn't remember exactly what happened. And then came the final blow, the doctor responsible for the initial care, had disappeared. She didn't resign. She wasn't transferred. She simply vanished. It was as if each piece was being carefully removed from the board. But so that no one would notice, they left everything almost convincing. Almost. Paranoia turned to vigilance. And vigilance turned to discovery. The millionaire found an old photo of his wife, with a small scar on her left shoulder, a childhood mark. And when he saw the autopsy report on the body buried that week, an almost illegible phrase shattered his last certainties: absence of scars. That was enough. He still didn't know who was in the coffin, but he was absolutely certain it wasn't Helena. And for the first time since the accident, he felt something dangerous: hope. From then on, everything would change. Because if Helena was really alive, then someone had lied. And if someone lied, then there was a reason. A reason that probably involved much more than a simple medical mistake. But before discovering who was behind it, he would have to face something even more disturbing: the boy's revelation about the limbo where Helena was supposedly trapped. And what this limbo really meant was something he was about to find out. The millionaire couldn't get the boy's words out of his head. She's trapped between two worlds. It was too absurd an idea to take seriously, but at the same time, it explained everything that no one else could. The inconsistencies, the switched bodies, the missing doctor. It was as if the physical world had given its version, and now the spiritual world was demanding that he hear its own. And the more he remembered the boy's gaze, the more he realized that the boy wasn't lying. He had seen something that ordinary people don't see. Daniel, because now he knew the boy's name, described limbo as a silent place that doesn't know if it's day or night. A space where people don't feel time passing, but feel the weight of choices they haven't yet made. He spoke with a frightening naturalness, as if he had been there more times than someone his age could even imagine. According to him, Helena was there for a specific reason. She couldn't leave while a truth in the world of the living remained hidden. The millionaire listened with a heavy heart, as if each word were a piece of a puzzle he never wanted to assemble. What shook him most was when Daniel said that Helena wasn't confused or lost. She was conscious and trying to return, but there was something clinging to her, something preventing her from crossing over. Daniel described this thing as a faceless shadow, something that seemed to feed on the fear, guilt, and suffering of others. To the boy, these shadows appeared when someone died unjustly. It was as if they wandered until the truth was revealed. And Helena's shadow seemed particularly strong, too strong for an accidental death. The millionaire, still torn between reason and despair, asked the boy to explain why only he could see her. And Daniel smiled in that shy, almost sad way, like someone who knows a secret he'd rather not have. He said he'd seen spirits since he was 4 years old, but he'd never seen anyone like Helena. She's not dead, the boy said. And she's not alive either. She's in the middle, trying to hold both ends. That consumes energy. That hurts. The millionaire felt a pressure in his head, as if he were hearing a forbidden truth. The most disturbing part came later. Daniel said Helena only had 90 days to return. After that, limbo would swallow her whole, and no one would ever be able to find her again. It was as if the clock on the other side was speeding up, and each minute in the physical world was a step closer to absolute oblivion. The millionaire felt that burning urgency in his chest. He had missed the chance to save her once. He wouldn't miss it again. But before acting, he needed to understand what mission kept his wife trapped between worlds. And it was then that Daniel, with that look that seemed to pierce through walls, uttered his last words before everything changed. She was left in limbo because she found out who ordered her murder. And that revelation was just the beginning of what was about to explode. While the millionaire was trying to process the revelation about who really ordered Helena's murder, Daniel touched on another point that left him completely devastated. The accident hadn't just taken his wife, but also Apollo, the dog who had been with Helena since before their marriage. Apollo was more than an animal. He was part of the family, one of those who recognize fear, joy, and danger before humans do. The boy explained that in limbo, Helena was never alone. A large, luminous, and protective presence was always by her side. And when he described that presence, The millionaire understood immediately. According to Daniel, Apollo didn't cross over to the other side because he realized his owner was trapped. Animals, according to the boy, have a different perception of death. They don't get confused, they don't feel guilt, they don't carry emotional burdens. They simply feel it. And when they understand that they can still help someone they love, they stay close, as if the protective instinct continues to function even without a physical body. That's exactly what Apollo was doing, guarding Helena's path, preventing the faceless shadow from getting too close to her. The millionaire remembered Apollo's gaze in the days leading up to the accident. The dog was restless, growling at empty doors, avoiding certain rooms, as if he could already sense the approach of something no human could detect. Now, everything made sense. Daniel said that Apollo was like a kind of spiritual sentinel, a guard dog that no longer needed flesh and blood to fulfill its function. And that explained why Helena still had some chance of returning. Apollo held the line that connected her to the world of the living. The scene Daniel described was both beautiful and devastating. Helena, translucent and weak, trying to cross a gray corridor of limbo, while Apollo stood beside her, snarling at the shadow that tried to pull her back. He protected her from the unknown, but he couldn't do much more than that. With each passing day, the shadow grew stronger, and their time together shorter. The struggle was silent, but fierce, like a war fought at the bottom of an ocean. The millionaire felt like crying and screaming at the same time. How was it possible that Apollo had died, and yet was still fighting harder than any living person? How was it possible that an animal understood the gravity of the situation better than he himself? Daniel said that the bond between Helena and Apollo was so deep that it transcended death. He doesn't want to go until she's safe, the boy explained. Animals love in a way that you only understand when you lose them. But the most shocking part came next. Daniel revealed that on one of the occasions when he managed to see Helena, Apollo did something he had never seen an animal spirit do. It brought information from the world of the living to the world of the dead. It was as if the dog had crossed borders without asking permission. And what Apollo brought was so dangerous that it could change the course of the entire investigation. From the beginning, the millionaire thought Daniel was just a frightened boy with a fertile imagination. But the more the boy spoke, the clearer it became that he possessed a rare kind of sensitivity, an ability that, if spoken aloud, would be labeled madness by ordinary people. Daniel didn't see shadows, shapes, or blurs. He saw people. He saw their clothes, their expressions, their fears, and sometimes even their last memories before death. And for that reason, he spent much of his life being called a liar, strange, troubled. A child who spoke truths that no one was ready to hear. At age 10, Daniel had already learned a cruel rule. When you see what others deny, you become the target of jokes, contempt, and fear. He had slept on the streets since he was 6, not because he wanted to, but because his own family thought he was cursed. And it was precisely this condition of abandonment that made him develop an unusual emotional resilience. The world treated him as invisible, but the dead, they recognized him with frightening clarity. They were the ones who warned him of dangers, who accompanied him on difficult nights. And sometimes, they were the ones who protected him when the living tried to hurt him. His story had so many improbable points that the millionaire, even a skeptic, could no longer doubt it. And then Daniel recounted the first major manifestation he had experienced. At the age of 7, he warned a neighbor that her husband would have an accident. She laughed. 3 days later, the man fell from scaffolding and went into a coma. After that, the neighborhood began to look at the boy with fear, as if he were a walking omen. What nobody knew was that Daniel didn't cause the tragedy, he only saw it beforehand. As if he always lived a few hours ahead of the real world. What impressed the millionaire most was the boy's description of Helena with surgical precision. From the way she combed her hair to the way she frowned when worried. Intimate, delicate details, impossible for anyone to invent. Each word the boy spoke sounded like silent proof that Helena really spoke to him from the other side. Daniel confessed that he often tried to ignore the spirits, but some were so insistent that they seemed to pull him back. And Helena was one of those. She didn't ask for help. She asked for urgency. Daniel said he saw 3 types of spirits. Those who had already accepted death, those who were lost, and those who still had a mission. Helena belonged to the last group. She didn't cry, she didn't wander aimlessly. She pointed. She indicated pieces of the puzzle that needed to be aligned. It was as if she were trying to guide Daniel so that he could guide the millionaire. An indirect but necessary path, because Helena couldn't fully cross over into the living world. Not yet. And it was this semi-existence that left her spirit unstable, oscillating between lucidity and fragments of memory. But before the millionaire could ask any more, Daniel revealed something that made his stomach churn. Helena hadn't appeared to him by chance. She chose him because Daniel was the only one capable of seeing what was clinging to her, that faceless shadow. And that shadow, in fact, was not just any spirit. It was a much older and far more dangerous presence than any of them had imagined. The millionaire had always believed his company was his greatest legacy, built with sweat, sleepless nights, and an almost pathological obsession with excellence. But as he investigated Helena's death, he began to realize there was a machine operating in the shadows, right under his nose. Duplicate transactions, numbers that didn't add up, overpriced projects. These were subtle signs, scattered like dust in dark corners, that only someone in a state of absolute alert would be able to notice. And now he was more alert than ever. The pain had become the focus, and the focus revealed the lie. The first blow came when he confronted the finance director, a man who had worked with him for over 10 years. The reaction was extremely strange. Instead of explaining, the director became nervous, avoided eye contact, and tried to end the conversation too quickly. This triggered a silent alarm within the millionaire. It was as if, by tinkering with the numbers, he had pulled a thread that supported something much larger. And that something wasn't just corruption, it was an entire money laundering network using his construction company as a front. A network so well structured that it was only possible with influential people involved. As he sifted through old files, he found a pattern: multi-million-dollar contracts always coming from the same 3 outsourced companies. All registered under different names, but with the same address. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. There, the charade crumbled. It was obvious. They were using his company to launder dirty money, invest illicit funds in fake projects, and then reappear with legitimate profits. All this while he thought he had his life under control. The professional betrayal hurt, but the emotional truth was even worse. Helena had discovered this long before him. And this discovery didn't just come from documents. It came from Daniel's own reconstructed memory. According to the boy, Helena said she began noticing suspicious movements months before the accident. She tried to warn her husband, but he was immersed in expansion problems and didn't notice the signs. So she investigated herself. And she investigated too deeply. To the point of discovering names, connections, transactions, and the exact reason for her death. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was silencing. She knew too much. And someone needed to make sure she didn't talk. When the millionaire realized this, he felt as if the ground had opened up beneath his feet. The pain of grief transformed into fury. A hot, dense fury that burned from within. He didn't know who, within the company, had authorized her death, but he knew it was powerful people, people with contacts in the police, the hospital, and even within the government itself. And the more the truth came to light, the clearer the reason Helena was trapped in limbo became. Her case wasn't just an unjust death. It was an incomplete death. A story forcibly interrupted. But before the millionaire could devise any plan, Daniel made a revelation that changed everything. Helena identified exactly who had ordered her death. And that person's name was much closer to the millionaire than he ever suspected. Few people knew, but the millionaire had a closely guarded secret. Something he never told the media, the police, or even his closest employees. As soon as Helena died, he refused the traditional cremation procedure and transferred the body to a private laboratory specializing in cryopreservation. Officially, it was to preserve the corpse for future forensic reanalysis. But the truth was much more emotional and much less rational. He simply couldn't say goodbye. He couldn't bear the idea of burying her in a suit. It was as if freezing the body was the only way to postpone the end. For 2 whole years, That body slept in absolute silence inside a metal chamber, guarded by codes, security measures, and absurd confidentiality agreements. And during those 2 years, he visited Helena dozens of times, always alone, always at times when no one would know. He talked to her. He apologized. He asked for answers. He asked for strength. It was an incomplete grief, frozen along with the woman he loved. And all of this made sense now that Daniel had revealed that Helena hadn't really died. Perhaps that extreme decision had been the only thing that kept a small door open between their worlds. The lab doctors thought it was all a millionaire eccentricity. Until the day something impossible happened. One of the monitors that record electrical impulses, normally zero in lifeless bodies, began to emit a minimal reading. A trace. An almost imperceptible signal. Something so weak it could be an equipment error. But it wasn't. The signal repeated itself. It grew. And it formed a pattern. The technician panicked. He called the person in charge. And, for the first time since the accident, the millionaire received a call that made his heart almost explode in his chest. "Sir, your wife's body showed activity." The scientific explanation made no sense. The equipment wasn't faulty. The samples were intact. There were no external stimuli. And yet, something inside Helena began to react. An impossible reaction, contradicting everything known about biology, time, and death. The doctors were torn between fascination and fear. For them, it was an anomaly. For the millionaire, it was Helena calling. It was as if, from limbo, she had finally found a fissure to touch the physical world. A breach. A sign that there was still a way back. And then came the moment no one would forget. The cameras captured a small movement in Helena's left hand. Nothing big. Nothing cinematic. Just a microspasm, but real. Undeniable. Human. A movement that made one of the doctors fall to the floor, completely terrified. It wasn't a reflex. It wasn't a nerve twitch. It was voluntary. It was as if she were trying to say, "I'm still here." The millionaire knelt before the frozen cylinder and wept in a way he had never wept before in his life. But Daniel, seeing all this, dropped the bombshell that made everyone tremble. Helena only started reacting because someone from the world of the living had touched the wrong piece. Someone involved in the crime, someone who was afraid she would come back. And that person would take the next step in less than 48 hours. An attitude that could destroy everything. When the millionaire finally gathered enough evidence to take to the authorities, he knew he was getting close to something far too dangerous. It wasn't just a financial scheme. It wasn't just a murder. It was a web of corruption so deep that any wrong move could cost him his life, and even worse, cost Helena what little energy she had left to return. The police mounted a silent, precise, meticulous operation. But no one imagined that at the exact moment of the arrest, 2 battles were happening simultaneously, one in the physical world, and another in the spiritual world. Daniel was the first to feel it. He was with the millionaire when the clock struck 11:14 p.m., the exact minute of the police raid. Suddenly, the boy turned pale, as if he'd received an invisible shock. His eyes fixed on a point in nothingness, and he murmured, "She's fighting, and she's not alone." The millionaire tried to touch the boy, but Daniel seemed trapped between worlds, as if he were seeing 2 realities at once. On the other side, Helena was surrounded by a dense, living, pulsating darkness. The faceless shadow had finally revealed itself, and now writhed like a predator sensing its end approaching. On the physical front, the police surrounded the villain's office, one of the company's executives, someone the millionaire would never suspect. Tall, elegant, always smiling, always friendly. But behind the scenes, he was the one fueling the money laundering and orchestrating Helena's death to prevent her from exposing everything. What the police didn't know was that this man harbored an even darker secret. He had made a spiritual pact years before, in exchange for power and protection. And it was this pact that created the shadow that haunted Helena in limbo. While the agents broke down doors and handcuffed the villain, the spirit world descended into chaos. Daniel, completely captivated by the vision, began to narrate what he saw. Helena running through a corridor of cracked light, trying to escape the creature advancing behind her. Apollo, the faithful guardian, attacked the shadow with almost divine ferocity, preventing it from reaching its mistress. But the creature was stronger. Fueled by the villain's fear, by corruption, by lies, it was almost an emotional parasite that thrived on human evil. And now that the villain was about to fall, the shadow despaired. The spiritual battle mirrored the physical one. Every abrupt movement in limbo echoed in the office room. Lights flickered. Glass shattered inexplicably. Objects moved on their own. The police officers, not understanding anything, thought it was just unstable electricity. But Daniel knew it was the shadow trying to prevent the villain from being taken. Because if he fell, the pact would be broken, and the creature would lose its anchor in the physical world. With each passing second, Helena grew weaker, but also closer to a breaking point. Then, something unexpected happened. The moment the handcuffs closed on the villain's wrist, the shadow lost part of its body, as if it had been forcibly ripped away. It screamed, a scream only Daniel and Apollo could hear. Helena fell to her knees, exhausted, but alive. And Apollo, bloodied and weak, still held the creature at bay. The pact was broken. The bond between worlds, shaken. The victory was real, but incomplete. And Daniel, with a trembling voice, delivered the next warning. If the shadow doesn't die now, it will try to drag someone else down with it. And the person chosen was someone the millionaire would never have imagined. The instant the shadow lost some of its strength, the entire limbo seemed to change color. Daniel described it as a gray dawn, something that wasn't exactly light, but wasn't darkness either. It was as if Helena had been placed before a spiritual crossroads, a point that only those who have touched both worlds can see. The shadow weakened, Apollo wounded, and the path ahead finally visible. The choice Helena would have to make was cruel, devastating, and definitive. Daniel saw a door of light open behind her. It wasn't metaphorical, it wasn't symbolic. It was real to him, as real as any wall in the physical world. Inside, Helena felt a peace she had never felt in her life, a sensation that made her pain, her bad memories, and even the weight of her death disappear. It was paradise calling. Not a specific religious heaven, but absolute rest, a promise of eternal relief. It was the place where she could finally stop fighting. And for a moment she wanted to go in. But while the light beckoned to her, something held her by the heart, the millionaire. Not his body, not his memories, but his love, pure and intact, despite everything. Daniel said that this love was like a golden thread tied to her chest. A thread strong enough to rival the eternal light. Helena could feel her husband desperate, broken, struggling alone in the physical world, trying to mend a life that made no sense without her. And that feeling hurt more than anything the shadow had ever done. How could she abandon someone who had always been by her side? The decision became even more complicated when Apollo, bleeding in limbo, lay down beside her. Daniel recounted that the dog's spirit had no light waiting for him. Animals don't get choices, they follow the emotional bond. If Helena went to paradise, Apollo would disappear with her. If she returned to her husband, Apollo would stay behind, trapped between worlds, until he disappeared. It was an impossible dilemma, choosing human love or the animal love that protected her until the end. Each option carried loss, pain, and sacrifice. There was no complete victory. Meanwhile, in the physical world, the millionaire was in the laboratory where her body remained frozen. The machines still picked up small impulses, almost like a heart trying to remember how to beat. He held her cold hand through the transparent wall of the chamber, speaking softly, saying that he wouldn't give up, that he was there, that he would wait as long as it took. This connection crossed both worlds, and touched Helena in a way that eternal light could not. Her love for him wasn't perfect, but it was true, and true enough to rival eternity. So, faced with the light that promised rest and the love that promised war, Helena made her choice. A choice that echoed through limbo like a silent roar. She took a step back, toward the world of the living. But before it could cross completely, the shadow, in desperation, launched its final attack. An attack directed not at her, but at the millionaire. The executive's arrest seemed, at first glance, like the end of the line. But for Daniel, that was only half the story. He trembled as he described what he saw in the spiritual world. The shadow that haunted Helena was not just any entity, it was the manifestation of the pact made by the villain. A kind of dark protection that had accompanied him since his youth, when he agreed to exchange part of his soul for power, influence, and immunity. The shadow only existed because he fed it fear, corruption, and death. And now, with imprisonment drawing near, the creature was willing to do anything to prevent its host from falling. According to Daniel, the pact had rules. Ancient, primitive, non-negotiable rules. One of them stated that if the bearer of the pact were unjustly imprisoned, or rather, according to the perspective of the entity protecting him, the shadow was permitted to take someone from the family or someone emotionally important to balance the spiritual scales. It was a kind of bargaining chip. And at that moment, with the imminent imprisonment, the shadow had chosen its victim, the millionaire. Daniel could clearly see the creature writhing, cowering, preparing to attack not Helena, but him. In the physical world, the villain remained strangely calm, even handcuffed. It was as if he knew that something invisible would protect him at the last minute. His smile wasn't one of panic, it was one of certainty. Certainty that the pact would free him from guilt, from prison, from any human punishment. The police officers around him thought him arrogant, but Daniel saw the true reason for that tranquility. The shadow's bond was about to break, and when that happened, the creature would attack like a cornered animal. The only way for it to continue existing was by preventing its host's downfall, no matter the cost. Daniel tried to warn the millionaire, but it was too late. He was already in the cryogenic room, touching the glass of the chamber where Helena rested. And it was there, in that cold and silent environment, that the shadow passed through. The boy saw the space around the millionaire distort, as if the air became heavy, dense, thick. The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine, a shiver so deep it seemed to tear a piece from his soul. The shadow was there, ready to pull him in, ready to take him to the same limbo where Helena was trapped, but with no guaranteed return. The spiritual attack began as a mental blackout. The millionaire heard his own breath disappear, as if someone had taken the air out of the room. He saw shadows, flashes, distorted memories, moments from his life mixed with things that never happened. It was the shadow trying to break his mind before breaking his body. But, in the exact second the creature prepared to deliver the final blow, something unexpected happened. Helena's heart monitor in the chamber went off. A strong, high, violent spike. As if her spirit had collided with the wall between worlds to protect him. The shadow hesitated. And in that brief moment of weakness, Daniel saw something he would never forget. Apollo rushed out of limbo, crossed the spiritual chasm, and threw himself against the creature. The collision between the two made the entire laboratory tremble. Lights flickering, winds appearing out of nowhere, and the millionaire, stunned, breathless, with his heart racing, realized that this was not just a spiritual struggle. It was the battle that would define the fate of the three. And what's worse, the villain, even handcuffed, still had one last supernatural card to play. When Apollo collided with the shadow, a wave of energy swept through both worlds simultaneously. In limbo, Daniel watched the creature shatter into fragments, like black glass, exploding silently. In the physical world, the millionaire fell to his knees, feeling his body tremble with a vibration he couldn't tell if it came from within him or from the cryogenic chamber itself. And it was at that instant, the exact second the shadow shattered, that something unbelievable happened. Helena opened her eyes. Not completely, but enough for her memory to awaken violently. Her mind felt like a dam breaking. 12 years of fragmented memories, of life, of death, of near-death, returned like an unstoppable whirlwind. She saw the accident clearly for the first time. She saw who cut the brakes, who made the false call to distract the police, who tampered with the reports, and who put the wrong body in the coffin. Everything was there, crystal clear, as if time had preserved every detail only to return it at the right moment. Daniel described each vision, almost crying, because her memory wasn't just a recollection, it was a key. A spiritual and emotional key at the same time. Helena also saw limbo not as a place of torment, but as a waiting space, an interval between two impossible decisions. She remembered Apollo from the very first second, always by her side, always protecting her, always holding the line that connected her to the real world. She remembered the pain of not being able to touch her husband, the frustration of not being able to speak to him, the anger of knowing that his murder had been planned as a mere corporate obstacle. She remembered the intimate promise she made to herself, to return no matter the cost. And then came the most shocking part. She remembered the day of the villain's pact, because she was there. Not physically, but spiritually. She saw the ritual being performed silently, in secret, long before the accident. She saw the shadow attach itself to the man, like a living tattoo feeding on his ambition. And she also saw something no one knew. There was an additional clause in the pact, a hidden rule that the creature kept from the villain himself. The shadow could only survive if some innocent person died in the bearer's place. That's why she tried to pull the millionaire into limbo. It was her only chance to stay alive. But the breaking of the pact brought an unexpected side effect. With the shadow destroyed, the energy that kept Helena trapped between two worlds lost its balance. The line connecting her soul to her body in the chamber began to vibrate, unstable, on the verge of breaking. It was now or never. Either she would return completely, or she would disappear forever. Daniel shouted this to the millionaire, who, desperate, tried to wake her with words, with tears, with anything that could pull her back. He wasn't talking to a body, he was talking to her soul. Then, in the most delicate moment of all, Helena remembered something she had forgotten even in limbo. An old promise they had made long before they married. A phrase spoken in their youth, kept in the deepest corner of their memory. The phrase that said, "If you ever get lost, I will find you, even if it's between worlds." This memory ignited within her like pure fire, and it was this fire that began to guide her back. The boundary between worlds trembled. Her body shuddered, and Daniel realized that the final choice was approaching. Because upon recovering all her memories, Helena understood something terrible. If she were to return to life, something from the other side would have to be left behind. And that decision would break her heart, and his. Daniel always avoided recording what he saw. He said that, the dead don't like cameras, as if exposing the invisible were a form of violation. But that night, something inside him, perhaps courage, perhaps desperation, driven him to do the unthinkable. While Helena struggled to cross the boundary between worlds, the boy pulled out an old cell phone with a cracked screen and pointed it at the space where he saw the spiritual rift opening. He knew it could cost him dearly, but he also knew that someone needed to see what was happening. He didn't want proof. He wanted witnesses. When the millionaire realized what Daniel was doing, he tried to stop him, but it was too late. The flash went off. A white flash pierced the laboratory, illuminating what, to the human eye, seemed like mere empty air. But, for Daniel, it was the exact moment when Helena was trying to touch the physical world. He felt the air vibrate, the light tremble, as if two realities were compressing into a single crack. The boy pressed the button again. Another flash. Another glare. And something began to manifest on the screen. The first images emerged blurry, distorted, full of noise, as if the camera were struggling to translate the invisible. But on the third shot, the photo froze something impossible. A translucent, feminine silhouette, curved as if emerging from an invisible portal. Behind her, a kind of golden light pulsed, fragmented, like liquid fire spreading in slow motion. And beside the figure, there was a larger, nebulous point with two small white glimmers, Apollo's eyes. The dog was there, guarding, crossing, fighting. The millionaire, upon seeing the photo, felt his heart stop for a second. It wasn't a shadow, it wasn't a reflection, it wasn't a trick of light. It was her. The shape was undefined, but the outline, the way she tilted her head, even the position of her hands, it was Helena, without a doubt. He fell seated, breathless, while Daniel took another photo. This time, the image captured something even stronger, a kind of tear in the air, as if a veil were being forcefully pulled away. And within that tear, Helena's face appeared for half a second, sad, tired, but alive. The virality of this type of image was inevitable. Daniel knew it. The millionaire knew it. But at that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the photos revealed a truth that no human being should ever see, the exact point of the crossing. And that point was opening and closing, like a door about to burst open. Each photo weakened the barrier, as if the flash acted as a knock on the door from the other side. It was dangerous. Each shot brought Helena closer, but also pulled something unwanted along. And that's when Daniel, looking at the last photo taken, turned completely white. In the corner of the image, almost imperceptible, almost ignorable, there was a fragment of shadow. Not destroyed, not dead, just waiting. The boy swallowed hard and uttered the phrase that made the millionaire freeze. She didn't come back alone. As soon as the shadow reappeared in the photo, the millionaire realized that his life, and Helena's, had only reached that point because of one person, Daniel. A street kid whom nobody saw, nobody heard, nobody believed. A boy who, ironically, saw more than all the adults combined. At every step of the journey, Daniel had been a compass, a bridge, a shield, a messenger. Without him, Helena would have disappeared into limbo. Without him, the millionaire would be dead. And without him, the truth about the crime would never have been revealed. But Daniel never asked for anything in return. He never asked for money, food, clothes, nothing. He only wanted to help Helena, because she asked. And because, in the silence of the streets, it was the first time someone truly needed him. The millionaire, who had always lived surrounded by luxury, realized that this child carried wounds far deeper than any ghost. Wounds of abandonment, rejection, hunger, fear. Wounds that no one had ever tried to heal. He saw in Daniel's eyes the same loneliness he had seen in his own when he lost Helena. Two souls broken by the world, finding meaning in each other. It was in the hospital, while Helena was beginning to show real signs of recovery, that the millionaire made the decision without hesitation. He asked for the documents. He asked for social services. He asked for a psychological evaluation. And he said, without trembling, "I want to adopt this boy." The doctors were confused. The social workers thought it was just emotion in the moment. But Daniel just lowered his head and cried. He cried because, for the first time, someone wanted him not as a witness, not as a fortune teller, not as a tool, but as family. From that moment on, the relationship between the two changed. The millionaire began to accompany him to every appointment, every evaluation, every step of the way. He bought new clothes, but nothing extravagant. Daniel still didn't feel comfortable. He bought him books to study, but also simple toys, because he realized the boy had never had a childhood. He enrolled him in therapy. He took him to see the mansion, no longer as the intruder from the first scene, but as someone who finally had a room of his own. And Daniel, as always, adapted to the new world with the humility of someone who knows that everything can crumble at any moment. But the most beautiful moment came when Helena, still between coma and awakening, felt the boy's emotional presence. Daniel held her hand, even without knowing if she could feel it. And in that touch, the millionaire saw something indescribable. Her heart rate increased. Helena recognized him. She recognized the energy of the boy who had carried her soul in limbo, photo after photo, vision after vision. She recognized the little guardian who kept her connected to the physical world when everything seemed lost. It was then that the millionaire understood that adoption was not charity, it was destiny. But like all good stories, this peace would not last forever. Because at the very moment Daniel received his new provisional certificate, the shadow that appeared in the photo gave its first sign of movement. And Helena's return was not yet complete. People imagine limbo as a dark corridor, or as an empty room where nothing happens. But for Helena, limbo was much more complex. A place that responded to the emotions, memories, and truths she needed to confront. According to Daniel, who narrated everything as if watching a film in real time, the first 6 hours were utter confusion. Helena saw fragments of the physical world as if looking through cracked glass. Distant voices, muffled sounds, memories repeated in loops. It was as if her consciousness was trying to remember what it was like to be alive. In the following 12 hours, everything changed. The darkness gave way to a fluid space, without ground, without ceiling, without direction. There, Helena saw people, some she knew, others she had never seen in her life. Spirits who were trapped like her, trying to resolve their unfinished business, trying to find loved ones again, or trying to understand how they died. Each one had a story, a pain, a truth. And each of these souls left a trail of energy that mingled with the limbo, forming paths that only those who had touched death could see. That's how she perceived the shadow approaching for the first time. The third stage, between 24 and 48 hours, was the most painful. During this period, Helena confronted her own past. Things she didn't have the courage to admit in life. Small and large regrets, decisions that changed everything without her realizing it at the time. Limbo didn't judge, but it showed. It showed with devastating clarity. She saw moments with her husband that she never valued enough, words she kept to herself, fears that hid important parts of who she was. But she also saw her strength, the courage to investigate corruption, the determination to protect those she loved, and the ultimate sacrifice that put her in that state. From the 48-hour mark, Helena began to see Limbo from above, as if it were a living map. And there she saw something that no one in the physical world will ever see: the spiritual connections between living people. She saw Daniel as an intense, vibrant, almost electric light, shining even in poverty and abandonment. She saw her husband as a large but fragile flame, trembling under the weight of guilt and pain. She saw Apollo as a golden beacon, pure and protective. And finally, she saw the villain as a black stain, enveloped by tentacles of the shadow that parasitized him. It was there that she understood his death was not an accident. It was purpose. The last 24 hours in Limbo were decisive. Helena found what Daniel called the way back, a kind of unstable bridge of light that connects the spiritual world to the physical body. This bridge only appears to those who still have something to fulfill, something to say, something to resolve. And upon stepping onto it, Helena saw flashes of the future. She saw Daniel in the mansion. She saw her husband holding her hand. He saw Apollo slowly dissolving. He saw the shadow still alive, waiting for a slip-up. And she saw herself defining everyone's destiny with a single choice: to return or to leave. At the end of the 72 hours, Helena was ready to cross over. She carried pain, yes, but also clarity. She knew that returning meant facing the trauma, rebuilding her life, protecting Daniel, loving her husband, and ending the shadow once and for all. But she also knew that the crossing would absorb a part of her. Nothing would return the same. Limbo always exacts a price. And hers was about to be paid. It was then that Daniel, his voice breaking, made the final revelation of that 72-hour cycle. She's coming. But she won't be coming back alone. Something is clinging to her. 15 years had passed since the day Helena crossed the border between worlds, and each of those years carried scars, revelations, and silent miracles that only a reborn family could understand. The millionaire, now aged, no longer saw himself as the powerful man he once was. He was above all a survivor. He survived loss, lies, an encounter with the supernatural, and the impossible return of the woman he loved. And with time, he realized that keeping this story to himself was a kind of selfishness. It was like hiding a truth that could heal other people. So he made the decision: he would write everything down. At first, nobody believed it. Literary agents thought it was exaggerated, too spiritual, too unbelievable. But it was precisely this disbelief that transformed the book into a phenomenon. Because the truth, when it's too big, always seems like fiction. The millionaire didn't sugarcoat the story. He told what he saw, what he felt, how he almost lost his own soul, how Daniel saved his life, how Apollo confronted a creature made of pure darkness, how Helena returned carrying light and shadow at the same time. The book became a perfect blend of personal account, supernatural suspense, and brutal poetry about love. And the whole world wanted to read it. Sales exploded in the first few weeks. It became an international bestseller. Translations, interviews, debates, documentaries, lectures. The public wanted to understand what lay beyond death, how Limbo worked, who the shadows were, how Helena survived. They wanted to know if it was all a metaphor, If it was literal, if it was spiritual, the millionaire always said the same thing: "I only told exactly what I lived." And that phrase went viral. It became a motto. It became a summary. It became absolute emotional truth. Daniel, now an adult, followed the entire process as a co-author. He was no longer the invisible street kid. He was a respected scholar of near-death experiences, invited by universities, interviewed by doctors and scientists. He transformed the gift that destroyed him in childhood into the tool that saved his adult life. And he always said that it all started with a simple phrase: "I saw your wife yesterday." He knew that that phrase changed everyone's destiny, including his own. And with the book, he finally had his voice truly recognized. Helena, for her part, lived through years of ups and downs. Carrying a part of limbo with her had consequences. Sometimes she saw flashes of the other side. Sometimes she felt presences that no one else felt. But with time, she found balance. Love reconnected her body to her soul, and spiritual therapy, combined with a new life with her husband and Daniel, reconfigured her destiny. Helena became a symbol of hope for thousands of people. And the most beautiful thing, she never stopped honoring Apollo. The book dedicates its most moving chapter to the dog who fought against his own darkness to bring her back. The book's success didn't come from being a supernatural story. It came from being a human story. About impossible choices, about love that transcends worlds, about the courage to face what no one sees. And above all, about the silent faith that nothing, absolutely nothing, ends when it seems to end. 15 years later, the millionaire finally managed to breathe in peace. And on the last page of the book, he wrote the sentence that forever closed the cycle that began that night. Death knocked on the door, but love opened it first. And even after telling everything, I knew that some parts of the story still belonged only to the three of us. Because certain truths are too great to be contained in words. In the end, there was no doubt. Death is not always a farewell. Sometimes it's a journey. Helena returned. Daniel found his own destiny. The millionaire recovered the truth and lost the fears that held him back. And we, as spectators of this journey, gained something rare, an emotional testament that love, loyalty, and courage resonate beyond the limits of the body. But now I want to hear from you. If it were you, would you have the courage to cross into limbo to save someone you love? Do you believe that animals truly stay when we miss them? And what's more, could you cope with memories that resurface after touching death? Leave a comment below. Your opinion could become a future video. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this story with someone you love. Because sometimes, we just need to hear something like this to remember that nothing ever truly ends. And remember the final phrase that echoes from this script. Death knocked on the door, but love opened it first.